Now let's go back to our top story, one of our top stories, and that is the proposed legislation on racial harmony. It will take time before it is implemented. Law and Home Affairs Minister Shanmugam says that's because it will involve a carefully thought-through process. He says he's been speaking with my colleague Angela Lim on Channel 5's News Tonight. Mr. Shanmugam began by explaining why the new law is needed to tackle race-related offences.
We have a number of laws to deal with very egregious conduct. But as you heard the Prime Minister, it's a sense that, there is more that we can do to try and shape social norms. So the new act, Racial Harmony Act, Maintenance of Racial Harmony Act, will collect together the existing legislation, put it in one place, but also add on to that some additional legislative provisions, which we hope would signify how we want certain types of social behaviors to evolve. And it shows the importance that we place on this issue.
Now, Minister, considering how delicate and sensitive racial and religious issues can be, and very nuanced as well, what are some challenges writing this into law? And also, how will it apply then to employers who say we do have a racial preference for the employees we hire?
Okay, there are two parts to it. One, the challenges in the drafting of the law, and second, employers, if I can deal with them separately. The challenges will be plenty because we are going into social behavior. And you don't want to criminalize every single act. And if you tried, the law will fall flat. It will become unworkable. So it can't be too intrusive. And yet you want it to be able to work in a way that encourages racial harmony and brings people together and shows that society frowns upon certain types of conduct. And I've said it elsewhere. You also don't want to criminalize in the sense that you don't want to send people to jail or put fines on them. You want to try and deal with it at a community level. Say, for example, if you insulted a certain community, perhaps requiring you to better understand that community, do some community service, that kind of thing. So we need to calibrate the options as well to try and make it workable. So it will be challenging. Specific to your question on employers, Prime Minister mentioned two pieces of legislation. So TAFEP currently has various rules on discrimination in the workplace. And that would be given legislative teeth, put into law. So your employment should depend on your abilities and competence and suitability for the job, not on the color of your skin.
Yeah. Well, I want to pick up on that then, Minister. As you say, from guidelines, we're now going to have anti-discrimination law. So this will primarily affect anti-discrimination based on nationalities. But how will this also affect minority groups in Singapore? Will they benefit somewhat from having better workplace practices under this law?
That's a target, that's the intention behind the legislation, but it's not just minorities. Women will be covered too, and women are not a minority, but they do face discrimination. So women would be covered. And as I said earlier, whether you get employed and whether you are in employment, how you perform should be based on competence, right? It shouldn't be based on age or your sex, whether you're man or woman, and on your race, the color of your skin. So this second legislation, which is being dealt with by Ministry of Manpower, would try and deal with those issues.
Now, Minister, I have to ask also, can you walk us through the implementation process here? How exactly will this be rolled out, and when can we expect the law to come into force?
We talked about the challenges. We have started work on it. We've got to think that through, conceptualize it, say what are the different parts that we want to cover, and how do we want the law to operate? What kind of sanctions, penal and non-penal sanctions. And we will be working with MCCY, the other ministry, as well as other agencies and OPSG as well, onepeople.sg. Conceptualize, and then something like this that touches on the community so much, you need to consult carefully, and that will take some time. and after the consultation, drafting. So we're looking at a very thought-through process, which will take time. It's not going to be immediate.
You know, and speaking, Minister, about the community and, you know, taking into consideration individual ideas about this, PM Lee in his speech, I think this is a question in a lot of Singaporeans' minds. In his speech, PM Lee said, Singaporeans should have the moral courage to stand up against racist behavior. How exactly will we have these open and honest and constructive discussions on two fronts? Firstly, on social media, where it's relatively unregulated, people can hide behind anonymous names, for example, and on another front, which is intergenerational differences that might happen with regard to belief systems when it comes to race.
I think you've put your finger on the problem precisely, that constructive conversations, we all agree, are important. But when it goes online, as you said, people hide behind anonymous monikers. And many people are interested in a constructive conversation. They want to see how things can be structured. But there will be some who will seek to hijack. Malicious actors. There will always be a few, small number, but they will have an outsized voice. The other problem, even amongst people who are genuine and wanting a constructive conversation, online you can't clear doubts immediately, and the possibility of misunderstanding or understanding wrongly what has been said is, happens frequently or not infrequently. And that people can get pretty emotional when they think that something has been said, which is insulting when it wasn't intended to be that way. So very quickly you find that these conversations go into different tangents and arguments, and so those are the challenges in having constructive conversations, but we've got to try. Often what works is you get a group of people in a room or on Zoom or something, and then you talk to them and they clarify their doubts. And I find that those sorts of conversations proceed much better. But online, we've got to try as well.